the Eastern Conference at large. Who's in, who's out from last year's playoff standings, and which teams made the key acquisitions after the New Jersey Devils to shake up the Metro and Atlantic divisions. We dive in next. The Devils Puck Luck Podcast, where we are your host. I'm Adam Armbrecht, breaking down the Brooklyn Nets on the Locked On Nets podcast with Doug Norrie, and your New York Football Giants fighting for that playoff picture as the season kicks off on OGP, the One Giant podcast with Andrew Makowitz. He is the 20-plus year season ticket holder and pulse of the Devils fan base, Danny McDonough. How are we, sir, as we're going to tap into the Eastern Conference at large, and I think probably be talking about a couple of shakeups in the Metro and obviously in the Atlantic as well.
I'm feeling great, man. This hockey season is going to be very different in the sense you go into the season as a Devils fan, feels a lot different than going into last season, expecting a hell of a lot more. A lot of shakeups in the Metro, I think you can agree. So where do you stand on who's in, who's out in the Metro?
Well, we're going to be looking at an Alan Mitchell article over on The Athletic that kind of names some of the key acquisitions, which will span in the Eastern Conference for this episode. And then we're going to do another one talking about the Western Conference as well. When we think about inside of the Metro, and then we'll touch on the key acquisitions, that yes, the Devils do get mentioned, my friends. You want to start Metro-based, and we talked about the Penguins being one of those rising teams. We think they were eliminated last year. I think that they are in this year. I think that the Islanders are out this year in the Metro Division. I don't expect any other real shakeups from the bottom half. Right. We've talked about the hierarchy of who's going to finish, who's going to win, where the Devils going to finish, where the Rangers going to finish. But to me, that's the only change for me in the Metro. Islanders out, Penguins in.
Yeah, I also think Columbus is going to be a lot better than last year, too. I think that they're not going to be a bottom feeder. I think that they're going to be competing for the 5th or 6th spot in the Metro. So, around where the Islanders are going to be.
So you think, wow, so you think even there's an opportunity here maybe for the Islanders, who we've talked about taking a tumble here, that maybe the Blue Jackets, maybe the feather in their cap is going to be, we improved and we were at least the next in line to to be in the conversation for the playoffs. And we'll talk about Atlantic Division as well. And
I think they're a team that could be hovering around the 500 mark, I think that they're going to be competitive. I think that you can't look at the schedule and be like, it's the Blue Jackets, whatever. I think this year is going to be very different for them. I think they have solid goaltending, which is obviously going to be a factor. And you got Johnny Gaudreau. He's going to score goals. He's going to be a problem for opposition. So I think they're going to take a step forward. I agree with you. I think the Islanders are going to take a step back. Listen, they have phenomenal goaltending and great defense. Who's scoring the goals? Tell me who's going to score the goals besides Barzal, who's going to get those numbers. Who is going to score the goals for the Islanders? I think that they're going to be 2-1 type of games here and there, 3-2 types of games. I don't see them being a factor in scoring goals and keeping up with the likes of the Devils, of the Canes, of the Penguins. So it's... You got to score goals. Goaltending is only going to take you so far. You're going to steal games as the Islanders. That's going to happen. But to me, you can't sustain that momentum to capture a top 3 spot in the Metro without goal scoring.
So last month over in The Athletic, as I mentioned, Alan Mitchell put together, he labeled this as, and this is last month, so there's other little signs that happen here, but the 5 most savvy NHL offseason moves and what they mean for the upcoming season. Right there at the top of the list, just to go Devils-centric for a moment here, Tyler Toffoli was his pick being added to the New Jersey Devils. Now he mentions obviously Timo Meier, Jesper Bratt. Like that's the headlines here. Right. If you don't do that, you wouldn't call the Toffoli one necessarily being a savvy move if you missed on some of those other opportunities. However, if you look at the idea that where they were when it comes to in the draft, understanding you're not going to be able to necessarily make an impact play. You're not a bad team that's going to put a young player out there very early in their careers. He's a quality scorer, as Mitchell mentions here, who can play a feature role on the top line or punish lesser opposition if deployed on the second or third line. If he plays on the top line with Hughes and with Bratt, 40-plus goals is possible for the veteran. Let's just stop right there on that one, because we've talked about last episode, we were discussing Timo Meier, discussing about Toffoli, where's this lineup going to happen here? And I listed him as maybe this other X factor. Is that, we should run this up the poll over on Twitter as well. 40-plus goals for Tyler Toffoli. Is there a world, let's just, at the least, is there a world where he actually could be on the top line for the New Jersey Devils?
No, there is. Listen, Lindy Ruff, you never know what's going to happen, number one, right? But I still think, like you talked about last episode, X factors, are Timo Meier, Jesper Bratt, and Toffoli.
Yep.
Those 3 guys are super important, and where they're going to be on the top 2 lines. I see Tyler Toffoli on the second line, but I think to your point, like you were talking about last episode, whoever's playing with Jack Hughes,
that's really what
their numbers are going to be elevated.
By the way, the X factor is Jack Hughes because this is the elevator of those around him.
And honestly, Nico Hischier too. You know, when Nico Hischier's, I'm sorry about that, I'm kicking tables. When Nico Hischier is taking faceoffs, he's a great faceoff guy. He's a great center. He's a great playmaker. So, is it possible? Yeah. We talk about it all the time. We have high expectations for this Devils team, and I think seeing what the reach could be is fun. Can these guys, can Toffoli get 40 goals? Can Timo Meier get 90 points? Can Jesper Bratt get 90 points? These things are great topics of conversation because it's all possible. Yeah. And that's what's phenomenal about this Devils team.
We're going to stick inside of the Eastern Conference here coming up in a second. And a final note from Mitchell there. New Jersey is only a top flight goaltender away from being truly terrifying and may already have one in unproven 23-year-old Akira Schmid.
Yeah.
The bandwagon is getting full here, and that's always a dangerous premise when you're a month away from the start of the season, but fun to have the discussion around. We will talk about another Eastern Conference team that had a bit of a letdown last year, but made additional key offseason moves, and look at the Atlantic Division coming up here in what I would like to say just 1 second. Right after we talk to you about our friends over at DraftKings, because you might not believe it, but it happens every year. 7 months without NFL football, but it is back. NFL is here, and DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the NFL, is giving you a can't-miss offer for Week 1. This week, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5 on any NFL game. DraftKings is hooking everybody up here with a game day greatness. All customers can take advantage of 2 new offers every single game this September. Click the app to see what you could get. Download now and use promo code
THPN.
You got there. To sign up, new customers take home $200 in bonus bets instantly just for betting $5. That's promo code
THPN.
Only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpdg.org. Oh, we're going to get it right so you know it's good for you. Visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hills Casino Resort, Kansas City. 21 plus age, varies by jurisdiction, void in Ontario. See dkng.com/football for eligibility, terms and responsible gambling resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance and eligibility and deposit restrictions. Why? They do apply.
I wonder what the numbers are. We'll probably look at it later on, but what the Penguins are to make the playoffs this year.
The Penguins to make the playoffs?
To make the playoffs, and I think we can jump off right there. We were talking about it before we started to record today. Yeah. I think the Penguins are going to compete for a number 3, maybe even a number 2 spot in the Metro. I think that you're
in the Metro?
Yes. Penguins.
In the Metro?
In the Metro.
So you're saying the Penguins are going to compete to overtake the Canes?
They can. I'm going out there and saying it.
I'm not that high on the Penguins.
I don't think they're going to. I think that they could have the type of season if their goaltending holds up. Sure. I think that to me, this is their last hurrah. Right? You went all in. You went all in with the additions. You got Erik Karlsson right now. So with Letang and Karlsson, just those 2 guys on defense, they're going to make a splash. They're going to be very good on the power play. We know that. And you got Malkin, you got Crosby. You know that they're going to have better seasons. You know that they're going to. It all depends on health. We always talk about this.
Sure.
But they're not going to lose the way they did last year coming down the stretch of the season. And when they are in the playoffs, they're dangerous.
Yeah.
Let me rephrase this. Metro-wise, I think Canes and Penguins are going to play in the first round. Canes and Penguins are going to play in the first round. I meant take over in the sense they could beat the Canes in the playoffs because you never know what the Penguins are going to do.
Gotcha. Because, for me personally, inside the Metro, we've said this before, I think it's the Devils and it's the Canes battling up top there, and then it's about the Penguins overtaking the Rangers and creating that hierarchy there.
But I still think it's going to be closer than you think. I still think that the Penguins can get a lot more points than they did last year, and I think that they could sneak into... Look at that number 2 seed. I still think the Canes are going to get the number 2 seed. And and they're going to be close with the Devils.
Let's so I agree with you there. So there's no, I didn't want to get crazy with it, but also a little bit interesting here. Let's also highlight then over in the Eastern Conference, the Atlantic Division, reminding everybody last year it was Boston, Toronto, Tampa Bay, and Florida that made it into the playoff picture. Obviously, the Sabres, Senators, Red Wings, and Canadiens were on the outside looking in. In terms of point totals, though, obviously the Sabres 91 points. They were 1 point away from there. 86 for the Senators, just missing on the outside looking in. Those two teams at 91 and 86 respectively would have been battling right there with Pittsburgh and then ahead of the Capitals last year. Who do you have? Do you have a shakeup here in the Atlantic just in terms of in or out making the playoffs?
Yes, I think Buffalo's in this year.
Okay.
I think Boston Bruins are out from being the President's Trophy.
That's a massive
President's
drop.
Cup trophy. Most points in the NHL. I think they are out. I think
Keep having your conversation there. I need to look at some literature here.
I think they're going to struggle. I think that they have lost a lot of guys, and I think that they are going to fall to right outside the playoffs. And I think the Buffalo Sabres are going to be in. I think the Leafs are going to run away with the division, and then we talk about the Leafs performing in the playoffs. But yeah, no, listen, I think Boston's out.
Still 20-1 odds for Boston to win the Stanley Cup this year. The Devils are 16-1.
Yeah, no, listen, as they should be. They had the most points in the NHL last year, and they ran away with it, so they should be up there. I just think that the Atlantic has gotten really strong. Even Ottawa is stronger this year, and they were slow start last year. But I think that you're going to have the Leafs, Tampa, Florida right there in their top three. And then I think Buffalo's going to be 4. And I think that Boston's 5.
And just over on, we talked about this before, Hockey News, absolute fantastic. They have someone there. I will give her the shout out by name before this episode ends that covers the Devils, obviously. We talk about X factors, rookies here just for the Bruins. We're thinking about whether or not Lascelles is going to be a big player for them there. Sure. X factors, I want to make sure I don't miss anybody here. I think mostly it comes down to the remaining veterans who you've had, who you've lost, and being able to dude, when you have 135-point team.
Yeah, I know, man. It's
a lot. Now, it is an ultra competitive, not just Atlantic Division, but an Eastern Conference that's ultra competitive. How when you talk about the Sabres getting in, where do you see them point total wise? Let's think about it from an Eastern Conference standpoint and number 1 seed. Clearly, Boston was the top tier there last season. But if you think about Toronto, 111, the Canes, 113, the Devils, 112, we think the Rangers are dropping off. We think the Penguins are coming up. Are the Tampa Bay Lightning, are the Panthers, are the Sabres getting towards that 100-point mark this year?
I think the Leafs are going to have like 120 points. I think they're going to be probably, in my opinion, the best in the East, the number 1 seed in the East, followed by the Canes or Devils.
Sure.
Whoever's going to get that top, let's hope the Devils, in the Metro. But I think that Buffalo is going to be mid-90s to 100 points, and I think Boston's going to be very close to that too, and I think those two teams are going to be battling out for a playoff spot.
All right, that is what wraps up the Atlantic Division, wraps up the Metro Division, wraps up the Eastern Conference. I agree with you that I think there's going to be a shake. Well, it's hard for me to say. Remember, Florida went on a run and surprised everybody. Are they cemented? If the Sabres are making it in, I am still going to say that the Bruins are going to make the playoffs because it just seems like a travesty if they fell off that much. But it is a very tumultuous offseason for them. Yeah. And I think the way that they fell and stumbled last year really informed the decision making.
Very different team.
Yeah. So it's going to be very interesting to watch them, obviously. We'll keep an eye on that. That being said, that means that we're really only talking about a 1 or 2 team shift here. There may be a violent one for Boston and the Sabres getting in, but that's 1 change in the Atlantic, and it's 1 change in the Metro for us effectively in terms of teams making it in and teams coming out, right?
For the Rangers in the Metro, they need to rely on those kids. Lafreniere and Kakko have to have good years to really sustain their offense as well. Listen, they're going to have their key guys that are going to score goals. Yep. The Kreiders are going to score goals. But if they struggle, the younger kids struggle, similarly to how they did last year, the Rangers could be in trouble and fighting for a playoff spot. And that's not even my bias. No. I'm separating myself here, too, with the bias.
And I actually think that's the difference between what's happened with Boston here and what's happening with the Rangers. The Rangers would say they had a disappointing season last year, right? They get knocked out by the Devils. But for them, they have youth that should be ready to balance out this difference here. And that's why I think them staying in the 100 to 105 point range makes sense. It's really about the other teams. It is about the Penguins saying, do they ultimately get back to expectations? Because I think they should have been a 100-point season based on veteran experience.
So out of the top 4 teams in the Metro, who do you think could slip up?
Again, in the Metro, top 4 teams, I think the Islanders are the big slip up.
No, I'm talking about with our predictions. So our predictions, we both have the Canes, the Devils, the Rangers, and the Penguins in the playoffs.
Yes.
So out of those 4 teams, who can have the biggest letdown because of
Rangers. Easily.
Right.
Rangers. Yeah. And I think the Rangers could easily still be a top 4 team. They could maybe even still keep themselves ahead of the Penguins and have the exact same result, losing in the first round of the playoffs, because I think the matchups are going to be brutal for both of them.
And remember, they have Shesterkin.
And that's always going to be the X factor. And but by the way, he played. You may not think this, but you tip your cap to him. He played great against the Devils.
Absolutely. Listen,
and got beat.
He's a great goaltender. He's always going to keep you in series and playoffs. He's always going to keep you in games. And that's the great thing about him. It's as a Ranger fan, you're down 1-0, 2-0. It could literally be 4-0. And that's a great thing about the goaltending for the Rangers. And
that's where you go back to the young kids and saying, when you're still in a game, then you can never. And by the way, we mentioned in that article, it's why the X factor for the Devils, as everyone knows, remains the goaltending, because we don't know for sure if this is a keep you in the game goaltending unit, or if this is a leave the door open at all times, even though we know the Devils are going to be a high-powered offense.
Blake Wheeler, in addition, too, for the Rangers, is going to be very interesting to see who he plays with, if he's going to play with some of the younger kids to really help them develop.
Making sure, by the way, before we cap this off and then come back next time where we are going to be talking about the Western Conference, a lot of key names and additions mentioned there in the Athletic article, but the New York Rangers did sign also Nick Bonino to the 1-year deal. I want to make sure, because you mentioned it, takes away from the Penguins. It's a 1-year, $800,000 deal. He is 35 years old. Right. But when you talk about veteran additions, these are the marginal moves, I think, when you're looking at the pecking order inside of divisions. We don't know how those impact. Same thing we talk about the Devils. You don't know until you see training camp, early season, and maybe create that backstop for young players.
And the Devils won in the sense of who they got offensively in the offseason compared to the Rangers.
1,000%.
Obviously, Bonino and Wheeler are good players, very good veteran players that you hope, as a Ranger fan, are going to help the young kids. The same thing with Tyler Toffoli, a veteran presence being inserted to maybe help a Holtz.
Yes.
To maybe help a Holtz grow. Same way you have Palat helping him grow on that line. So, it's very interesting to see. And also, in Atlantic Division, watch out for the Lightning with some injuries, and I think that it can fall down too. I think that's a team in the Atlantic you got to watch out for the Lightning. They're a little bit older. They have some older guys, so injuries are going to be a factor, I think, in the Atlantic Division. I'm curious to see where they finish.
Fun to watch the top end of the Atlantic.
Oh, yeah.
Because are the Panthers going to continue to surge here? You mentioned the Sabres getting in there. I think Boston does come well down, whether or not I think they missed the playoffs, but you could see a big shuffle. The top 3 seeds in the Atlantic Division could be completely different.
Yeah, I went back and forth with, my predictions on it. 2 weeks ago, I thought that Boston was going to make the playoffs as well, but I'm looking at the teams and the rosters.
Yeah.
I have it Leafs, Panthers, Lightning, and then Sabres.
By the way, we do have the Hockey Podcast Network Fantasy League. So as we move our way through September, we're also going to tap into that and talk about some of these guys on all these teams, including obviously the Devils, and some players to keep an eye on when it comes to roles, expectations, and big performances, both on the ice, real, and in the fantasy rink. Until next time, though, we are going to dive in on the Western Conference, so be sure to be over on YouTube, subscribing, turning on the alerts. Let's build up that following and fan base. We appreciate the interaction. We appreciate the conversation on those podcast feeds as well. Over on Twitter, at NJDevilsPL, at Danny the Face, at Adam Armbrecht, and on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, at
Devils Puck Luck.
You better believe it. Until next time, just like Tyler Toffoli, let's all be rolling our way to a great Devil season. Catch you next time.
That was off the cuff, too.